All right, we are live. This is Faye Arbaugh and Thomas Dunn, and we are here with Hot Topics today. And we're super excited to be able to be with you guys, to be live broadcasting for the first time. And even though we ask you to please pray for us because we've experienced much difficulty already. We were supposed to start at 11 and it's 11:40. So if that tells you anything, the principalities, rulers of the air, and princes of darkness do not want us to present the information that we have, to talk about the things that we have to talk about. When I was praying about this, Tom, I really felt that we needed to discuss pedophilia and the fight for our children. I keep seeing every day we are bombarded with seeing things of pedophilia that are coming against our children, and we are supposed to sit back and accept it, to allow this to happen, to allow the homosexuality agendas and all these things to just take over. And I refuse. How do you feel about this, Tom? What are your thoughts?
You know what? As I'm sharing the post here on Facebook, just to let people know that we're going live, I am in complete agreement with you. I find myself so many times, Faye, speechless.
Yes.
That this is really happening.
Yes.
That there are people, whether they be politicians, whether they be celebrities, that are fighting for the right to abuse kids.
Yes.
I can't believe. I'm like, is this really happening?
Yeah.
I can't believe it. I really can't. So, and I can't believe that these people that are doing this have so much power. They seem to be winning in many areas. I'm like, how are these people beating us? How are these people beating us?
Right.
And I'll be honest with you, some days I'm like, I'll think being very transparent, I'm like, wow, we're screwed. We are screwed.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's my flesh, just tempted with defeat. No, we're not. We're not. We have the God of the universe, the creator of all things, on our side. He hates this stuff. There's a history, there's a legacy in God's word. And I've been reading about it in Jeremiah, where God sent Jeremiah out to tell, he said, I want you to be a prophet and tell these people what's going to happen and why it's happening. And the same thing. And we've fallen away. We've fallen away from our first love.
Yes.
And you know what? I might get discouraged. I might get defeated from time to time, but my resolve is to fight it, to expose it, and to push forward. And when I'm down, somebody else will be up. And when somebody else is down, I'll be up. And we're going to be fighting. This wickedness is just crazy mental illness.
Yes.
And it should be simple, but the Bible says the God of this world has blinded the minds of unbelievers. They have a supernatural blinding over their eyes. They cannot see the truth. They don't know what's going on. They think good is bad and bad is good. Everything is twisted. So I'm praying, Lord, if we got to get one person at a time and change their mind. There's all kinds of propaganda. There's all kinds of deceit, and they're trying to turn it into a hate thing. Well, if you don't support them, if you don't support this pedophile movement, okay, then you're a hater. You hate these people. That's not true. I'm sorry, that's not true, and we have to stand up and say it's not true, and we have to tell the body of Christ that it's not true. And the people who are blinded, we may not be able to reach a lot of people. Those who are unwilling to see are the most hopeless. There are none so blind as those who are unwilling to see the truth.
Well, I just want to interject really quick. I just went on Google and I typed in pedophilia and Wikipedia. Now, I thought, okay, it's kind of funny that this still says this, but Wikipedia says pedophilia, all, and it has an alternate spelling. It says is a psychiatric disorder in which an adult or older adolescent experiences a primary or exclusive sexual attraction to prepubescent children. Okay, so it's a psychiatric disorder, is what Wikipedia describes it as. Um, the So we know that there's something wrong with this.
Yeah, and absolutely.
It's not a normal thought process to be attracted to children, to want to display enamorous affection, love. I mean, you can love children, but this is a different, we're not talking about a healthy love. We're talking about most normally a sexual love, like you would feel towards another man or woman if you were,
Right.
at dating age or above. So the next thing that I looked at, and I know that you've probably seen this, is on CBN News. There's a big article about this young woman. It says she's a scholar from Germany, German medical student, and she is arguing that pedophilia is an unchangeable sexual orientation, in her words, just like heterosexuality, and that society should become more accepting of pedophiles. This is her words. She said, why our perception of pedophilia has to change. She makes the extremely controversial claim that pedophilia is simply another sexual orientation. According to current research, pedophilia is an unchangeable sexual orientation, just like, for example, heterosexuality. No one chooses to be a pedophile, so no one can cease being one. The difference between pedophilia and other sexual orientation is that living out the sexual orientation will end in disaster, and that's her words. Interesting.
Yeah. This reminds me of the film The Kinsey Syndrome, and I'm forgetting the name of the filmmaker that made that movie right now. It'll come back to me in a little bit, or I'll look it up. But The Kinsey Syndrome is about Alfred Kinsey. Sorry, I'm watching. What the heck is wrong with me? What's my dog doing? He's acting goofy. Making sure. Alfred Kinsey is the guy that wrote Sexuality and the Man. I don't know. It's books that came out in the 60s. I can't remember the name of the books that he wrote. Human Sexuality and Men, Human Sexuality and Women, something like that. And he wrote these books back in the 1950s, maybe. So, and in his studies, he researched for years. There's a movie out that whitewashes this guy and turns him into a hero. I don't know if it's called Kinsey, I think, and it's where Liam Neeson plays Alfred Kinsey. And they try to make this guy into a hero, but in fact, whether he did it himself, but he got research on somebody from somebody where they were abusing children in their research with a stopwatch. And I hate to be so graphic, but you know what? I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm going to say go watch the movie. It might be free out there. It's called The Kinsey Syndrome.
Is it a documentary?
What's that?
Is it a documentary?
Yeah, it's a documentary.
I think I saw that. I think I did. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. So they would sexually abuse children with a stopwatch in hand to see how long it took them to become aroused.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or to be stimulated in some way. So, and this is the research. So they took that research and they took it into the courts and they said, hey, don't be so hard on these pedophiles because these kids are actually enjoying it. Okay. So I don't want to go into any much more than that, but you can
Right.
watch the movie and obviously, you know, I don't know.
Well,
I mean,
here.
it's sick, but this is the what the film says. The film says no wonder that we have a judicial system throughout the land that goes easy on these pedophiles because the Kinsey report convinced judges that they weren't doing bad things. They were, this was a good thing that was happening to children, and not to go, so hard on them. So
Well,
yeah, and that's been an underlying problem for decades now, and the film shows that. What is that guy's name? I can't think of his name right now, but I'll have to look it up.
yeah, I think I've seen that what you're talking about, but you know, I want to say this, and this is going to be very blunt, and it may be a little out there too, but talking about what you just spoke about. Now, I'm going to preface this with I am a sexual abuse survivor from a person who was a pedophile, and that was my father, namely. And I was abused by other people as well. But here's what I want to say about that particular thing that you just mentioned about children being aroused. God created us all to and I've spoken with this on several of my other shows with other women and men who have been sexually abused, and they will all agree with you, because this is a problem for a lot of sexual abuse survivors. Is they have tremendous guilt over this very issue, and it is because they felt sexual arousal from their victimizers. So when they were being victimized, their bodies naturally and automatically responded to what was happening or what was taking place. Not everyone, but some do. So whenever you are stimulated sexually, our bodies were designed and created to respond in that manner, not as children, but as consensual married adults. But although we are children, a lot of times that have been abused, that does not change the basic makeup and structure of the way that we were created. So yes, you can be stimulated to the point of arousal. Your body does react in a certain way when that takes place or when that happens. So it is a natural thing for that to happen. That does not make it right. That does not mean that an adult man or woman that is sexually stimulating or arousing a child is extremely wrong. It's extremely
It's yeah,
off on every level, because it's a psychiatric
yeah.
disorder, just like
It
we read.
brings so much confusion
And I
into
don't
the mind of the child that's being abused, because they have this experience of being violated and also this experience of pleasure at the same time. And this is a formula for a future pedophile. This is a
yes.
formula for, in some smaller cases, a serial killer. This is a formula for a really messed up adult who is going to go down the road of homosexuality, who's going to go down the road of prostitution. If it's in sex work a lot of times for females. Okay, so the I don't know if you remember a few years ago, there was they caught this guy in Cleveland named Ariel Castro, and he had three women that he'd been holding hostage up there, and those women were being abused and raped. Okay, those young girls, and they had so much confusion, and they were jealous of each other
Yeah.
inside of that home, and then they felt so much guilt for being jealous because they were being raped and abused.
Yes.
And the psychological damage that it does to a child, even even just a tiny bit, even
Yes.
there's some horrific things that are horrible, but um even the slightest, I'll tell you what, I know I have a family member who, what happened to them was, most people would consider, wow, that's you got off very easy. They had somebody else in their family, all they did was a girl expose themselves to a boy. Okay, and but that haunted that person in my family for years and messed them up psychologically.
Wow.
So it does not take much at all to do some damage and to sexualize a child. Okay, I think, and let me mention this real quick, because the serial killer in Cleveland, okay, and just to, I cannot remember his name, but he was a serial killer in Cleveland, and he lived right next to some kind of a meat factory, but he was stacking women up in his attic, and it smelled so bad that the meat factory had to close the doors. But what happened was he watched his mom beat his sisters for not doing the housework, and they were teenage sisters, and she would strip the shirt off of them and beat them with an extension cord. So he was seeing the abuse, the violence, but yet he was still getting confused because he was seeing, his teenage sister without her top on.
Mm-hmm.
And long story short, that guy, when he started killing people after he went to the military and stuff, he choked him with an extension cord. Sorry to be so graphic, you know, but that played a part, because
Yes.
when you steal a child's innocence, you cannot underestimate the damage that happens to them psychologically. I'm telling you, I don't care if it's just seeing briefly a pornographic image.
Yes.
I mean, the worse it is, the more severe it is, the worse the damage is, right? But even something very, what we would consider very light, still can do damage and still can bring confusion. So don't, yeah, I mean,
Well, and the thing is if you look at television today, any kind of television, anything you watch, I mean, even if you're watching mainstream television, you are bombarded with every kind of sexual orientation, every kind of, I'm seeing now, I'm seeing things like advertisements for things where they're it's obvious to me what is being presented, but it's subliminal to a lot of people because they don't even realize what the messages are that are being created right in front of them, that are being sent not to, they're being sent to the children. They're being sent to them, and the reason this is because our children are vulnerable. Children are the ones that the enemy wants to reach. That's part of why Gary and I do Tour Town, is we feel that they're the most important component in this battle right now that we are fighting, because if we don't train up our children, if we don't teach them correctly right now how to fight these battles, how to become spiritual warriors, and how to stand up for their faith when they are young, then you know we're really going to be hurting in a few years.
no, Faye, you're absolutely right. And many people know my story. I was 3 years old when I was exposed to pornography. And this is how it happened. I was at
Yes.
my parents' apartment, and there were pornographic magazines in the living room. And my parents would take a nap, and I would go out as a little kid, curious or just doing whatever. And I saw those magazines, and I was like, what is okay? I didn't know how to be sexually aroused, but I was just like, this is weird. How come these people don't have any clothes on? You
Right.
know? And that planted a seed in me that
Yes.
it took me, over 30 years to figure out what the heck was wrong with me. Okay. And why I had, it's like I always say it's like giving cocaine to a kid. You
Yes.
know, I didn't,
Yes.
I knew that it was like, okay, I knew that people don't normally go around without their clothes on. And I knew what I was seeing was forbidden. And I had a natural, we're born into sin. I had a
Yes.
natural flesh desire to seek that out.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, I grew up in the age of pornographic magazines, and you went to a friend's cousin's house, and his neighbor happened to have some stashed in his clubhouse somewhere. Now, I mean, you had to go on the look for it, right? But
Yeah.
now it aggressively comes for us,
Yes.
and it,
Because it attacks the mind, it
yeah,
infiltrates. I think pornography is probably the biggest tool that is used to um, to capture children's minds, to get them, to pull them into this. And it's what the enemy uses. I think it's one of his biggest tools that he
yeah,
uses in order to attract these children to this. And I think, you know that just like I was saying a minute ago, television is just bombarded with pornography. I mean, commercials and advertisements, and you know I mean, Gary and I, we were watching a show. I don't remember what it was, but um, while this show was playing, there was commercials and things that were playing for other shows, and I almost couldn't stand to watch the commercials that were being shown in between the show that we were watching, because it was so graphic and violent and
hmm,
evil, just plain evil. And it's all about who is, you know sleeping with someone, murdering someone, in complete witchcraft, out and out witchcraft. And this is directed towards our children because it was for like a teenage based audience, actually.
yeah.
So if the teenagers are watching and they've got younger brothers and sisters, they're going to be sitting there watching this too. So it's just reaching out and pulling them in. And
We
you know
cannot be diligent and fanatical enough about protecting our kids.
yeah.
My oldest son now is 25, and when we had him, we I was very aware of what happened in my life and steps I wanted to take to protect him. So I had kind of boundaries. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But I will say this: at the time, I had a lot of open doors and other things that I wish I would have made a stronger boundary in.
Right.
And then when he was 9, 10 years old, when I went through a divorce, he was very vulnerable because his mom and I were, you know, dealing with the divorce and dealing with our new life. So nobody was protecting him. Nobody protected me when I was a kid. I wish somebody would have guarded me and not had that stuff out. They probably, you know what? They probably never thought anything about it, that it could do any harm. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? They probably thought if a child sees this, it won't be any big deal. It's harmless stuff, and if they happen to accidentally see it, it's not going to hurt them. They won't even remember it. Wrong.
So what do you think? I'll ask you this question. I know I'm not necessarily interviewing you, but what
Hmm.
do you think is the solution to this? What can we do? Because, we can talk all day about the horrific things that are overtaking, our children and their minds and the graphicness of this.
Yeah.
So what do we do to combat this, Tom?
Well, several things. One, teach your children the truth about sexuality, God's view on sexuality. Teach them that God is the designer, He has a plan, and His
Yeah.
plan is best. Okay. Again, this has already been said, Faye, but this show, Hot Topics, we talk about everything from the pedophiles to the human trafficking to abortion, things like that. But it all goes back to sex. Okay, it all goes back to that misuse of God's gift to the married couple, sex.
Yes.
If people weren't misusing it, we wouldn't have a human trafficking problem as far as sex
Yes.
trafficking, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, people are creating a demand for that material out there, whether it's prostitution or whether it's pornography. So we have to teach our kids the truth of about God's plan for sexuality. You know what? You can shelter them, and protect them. And I don't think that's necessarily I mean, obviously, we need to protect them from losing their innocence, right?
Yes.
But there's going to become a certain point where they're going to be exposed one way or the other, even if you homeschool.
Yes.
So use any opportunity that you have, even if you're going through the grocery store line, at Walmart or your local grocery store, and you see there's a magazine up there that are right at eye level for kids. Use those opportunities to talk to your kids. Be open about it. Christians should be the number one people talking about sexuality because our God created it. Okay, it was His idea, and He has the best plan for it. I always, I use a couple illustrations. A deal breaker for a lot of people when it comes to God is they want to be able to be free sexually. Whether it would be homosexual relationships or heterosexual, just complete, sleeping around. You know what I'm saying? Complete indulgence in sexuality. So they're like, you know what? I'm not ready to serve God yet because I need to do this thing or that thing. Well, what you think that you're getting is a ripoff. You are shortchanging yourself because God's plan for sexuality, is so much better than what you think you're getting. That what the world offers is always a letdown.
Yeah.
I always use the example of my phone. Okay. Your phone, my phone, the designer of this phone had a plan. Okay. There's a way that you can use this phone that you're going to get the most use out of it. Okay. And if you try to use it for something else, I always use the example of using it for a hammer. You don't want to take your cell phone and hammer in a nail. You're going to break it. Okay. God had a design for us. And when we use it, when we use our bodies the way He designed, it works. You don't ever hear anybody say, well, God wants us to take a day of rest, so that's a deal breaker for me. No, people don't have a problem with that, right? Why did God want us to take a day of rest? He designed us. He knows that if we don't, we'll get sick. Our bodies will break down. Yeah. We need a rest physically and spiritually. And that's why he did it. He gave us, the same thing with why did God command us to not eat pork? Okay. Well, because God designed us. He designed, the pig, and He knows how this works, and it's not good for us.
Right.
And that's just one example. We could talk about a lot of things that aren't good for us, but nobody ever says, well, I'm not going to serve God because I want a day of rest. And he wants me to have a day of rest and I can't go for that. Well, it's the same thing. The design for the day of rest and the design for sexuality, same designer. And he has our best interest in mind. Yes. And He wants us to get the most out of life. So when I took lust off the table, my intimacy with my wife completely changed and flipped upside down. So anyway, there's that.
Here's another thing too. Like you were just talking about a minute ago, about sex trafficking and all that, um, and how it all starts with sexuality. And I agree with that. And I think if you really go even deeper, it starts with sexuality with children. I'd say probably 90% of the time, and
Mm-hmm.
these deviant things that we see, even right down to abortion. So many, not all, but I will say so many of these children that are being aborted are because people are having premarital sex. They're having sex that is outside of the marriage most of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time. Um, you know, uh, I've done numerous interviews with many, many different people who have lived homosexual lives, who have lived transgender lives. You've talked to David. These people, I did an interview with one woman, and she told me she lived a lesbian life for 20 some years of her life. And she said that in her group of friends, the people that she knew, that she had talked to, that she had been around during all those years of her life, she said every one of them, everyone had been sexually abused. And I've had, I think David has told me the same thing. I think Maritza, who both live transgender lives, have told me the same thing. You know, it all comes back to being introduced to pornography and sex and being stimulated at these children's young age. So then, and I think that's part of what the enemy is trying to do when he's showing all of this stuff on television. We're seeing all this propaganda and these agendas that are being forced on our children, because now they're being forced to make a choice, to make a decision as to what gender they're going to be, how they're going to identify themselves. Little boys that are wanting to be little girls and vice versa. This is where we're at, and it starts with the children. It starts from such a young age that this is being forced on them. So they're being bombarded with this. So what we have to counteract that with something. And I agree what you're saying. We have to counteract that with God's word, because that is the only thing that's going to change that. So, the problem is the media is huge. So how do we counteract that with our little specks on the map? This huge media, this huge agenda, that we're seeing. I see this girl the other day. She was talking about how she was hosting a homosexual gay parade in her town. She was 12, and she was the person who organized and hosted this. you know
Well,
how do we
and
mass reach
yeah,
the same way as the enemy is?
how come Jared gets on me for saying how's come? How come? I realize there's no F, but I don't know how to. I guess he says it happens a lot in the north. I don't know. Hey, guess what, Jared? I'm gonna say it the way I want. How's come? Um, he can go hop in a lake, right? Um, that this new phenomenon of drag kids, young boys that are dressing as girls, they're becoming sexualized. They're being lusted after by pedophiles, and then the mother is like, well, I don't understand how this happened. I'm disgusted by that pedophile that likes my son.
Right.
if heterosexuals were doing that to kids, they'd go to prison.
Yeah.
But excuse me, the homosexual community gets a free pass. So
Yeah.
how did this happen? A number of ways. One, the rejection of God. Two, the desensitization of America, of our family, to sexual things. Okay, those go hand in hand. The normalization, of all things sexual.
Hmm.
So yeah, I know. I realize we it does feel overwhelming, and there's seems like there's no place to escape it. I've been in those situations even where I went to see a kids movie and I couldn't believe the previews
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
were there, and I'm like, oh boy, I don't want to make a big deal about this right now,
Right.
with my son who's like 10 or 11 years old, and because I don't want him to, um, to create something taboo, because then it could create an interest, that's unhealthy. There's
Right.
already a natural interest, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I I've had these conversations, and I have these conversations with my kids. I have this with my wife on how do we protect them, you know, and we have to be diligent. We have to protect them. The world is aggressively coming after them. And I've had to deal with things with my kids' school
Yeah.
on this issue.
Yes.
Okay, and no, I mean, I'm one of those people that doesn't homeschool, but I tell you what, it would be a lot easier if I could, because I spend just as much time deprogramming them from
Yeah.
the lies, from whether it's science class or whether it's the LGBTQ agenda. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So I mean, it's not good. Now, it's good. I tell you what, for the city that we live in, we go, we're in one of the best school systems, around here, and we pay the price. We pay a higher price to live here because the real estate's a little bit more expensive here. We're on the low end of that. Let me just say that, but all the kids that my kids go to school with, like, their parents are rich, and my kids don't understand. How come we just can't go out and do this, just one night? I'm like, you don't understand. You might go to the school, but we're on the bottom end. You know what I'm saying? Of where we're at. So, and obviously, money doesn't make people, good or anything like that. But
Right.
um, anyway, I'm going down a rabbit hole. We still have to protect. We still have to deprogram. We still have to have these conversations. I've shown up at schools and board meetings more than probably 5 times to
So,
deal
what
with
do
this
you
stuff.
say to your school, Tom, when, I don't know what specific things are coming up in your
Yeah.
school, but what do you say to them, and what's their response?
Well, you know what? I'll tell you something. A couple different answers to that. One, I had to deal with my kids' school, my younger kids now. I only have 2 kids left at home, um, that are in school. And last fall, they wanted to have a day of recognizing transgender students in school. And I thought that is the worst idea I ever heard of. Okay. So they wanted everybody to wear the rainbow and wear colors. Okay. Well, it got shut down because some parents found out about it. And the principal whose idea it was, that was her last year there. Thank God. I don't
Yeah.
know if that's the reason why. Maybe it was. But people were outraged. I thought there would be more people outraged, but nobody showed up to that board meeting. And I showed up there. I found out about it when I was in Scotland with Russ Disdar, and I thought, wow, we're going to have an all-out brawl at this board meeting, because I thought the LGBTQ would show up, and I thought they show up in numbers, and the Christians are nowhere to be found. Nobody
Right.
showed up. I showed up. David Arthur was running late. He was going to be there, and I just said this. I said, hey, I think this is a bad idea. I said, I know many people, and I've known many people that live this lifestyle. I don't have any hate for them, and I've been friends with them in the past, and and I protected them, and I protected them against name calling and harassment and things like that. And I said, I am currently making a film about this exact issue right now. and I've researched it, and I'm telling you that acceptance is in this way is not going to solve this problem, you know. And I can't remember what I was stalling for time. I wasn't really prepared to talk, but that night I didn't think I would have to. And then nobody else was going to talk, so I tried to stall for time because David Arthur was coming. So I showed up and I just said, hey, I'm a concerned father. I don't want any of these kids mistreated that are transgender, that are confused. I don't want them mistreated. And I don't want my kids mistreated either. But this is what's going to happen when you have a day like that. What about the kids that don't agree with that? Then they don't dress up. Then they're going to get labeled probably for the rest of their high school years as a hater or a bigot.
Yeah. Yes.
So, you know, when my daughter went to school, Evangeline.
So what, before you move on,
Yeah.
what was their response to what you said, and what did David show up? Did he talk?
He did show up. He didn't get to talk, but we got to witness to some people.
Did they have a response to anything, or was it just
well, their response was they weren't going to do anything at that time. Like the day had already been canceled, and
gotcha.
There was somebody there who was a former student of the school who was trying to start a club in the school that was an LGBTQP friendly club, and they wouldn't let that happen. They said if the students wanted to on their own, they could do something, but nobody from the outside is going to come in and start something like that. Yeah. So anyway, the response at the time was, this is not going to be an issue. We're not going to deal with this, and it's over and done. So we got around it that time, but I'm sure it'll be back. Okay. When my daughter went to school, she went to a very liberal school. It was a performing arts part of a vocational school. And I told her, I said, I don't want you going there. And I was really concerned, Faye. I thought, this is really going to shake her faith, or these people, you know, I mean, if you think of a liberal school, then an arts department on top of that, they are the most liberal. And I went into that classroom. I had a talk with her before I went in. And then I went in. I told her, I said, this is what I think is going to happen. I went into that classroom and I was like, it's worse than what I thought. Because they have a picture. They had a poster of Eminem on the wall, the rapper. Eminem on the wall, who so hypocritical, but because in his music, who I used to listen to, you know, 15 years ago, in his music is all kinds of references towards violence, towards women and violence, you know, but yet they're saying they are against violence in schools and school shootings and all this stuff, you know. And then there were just several different things on the walls, you know, in the classroom. Then to come find out that the English teacher there was a super feminist. And I'm like, I do not want my daughter going to this school. And she said, Dad, I want to go. I want to go. And I said, well, I tell you what. I said, if anybody can do it, you can do it. But I'm concerned. I'm really concerned. And I said, if you're going to do this, you're really going to have to up your devotions. Right. You're really going to have to up your prayer. She did. She did. She went into that school. She did not compromise for 1 second. She was a light in a dark place. She changed many people's minds on abortion. She went in, I tell you, and I had to bite my tongue because I wanted to go in there and, you know, pull some crap, so to speak. I don't know. I was pretty upset, and I had to bite my tongue. I was like, okay, Tom, let Evangeline handle it. Yeah. Let her handle it. I don't want to embarrass her. Yeah. Okay.
Well, and there comes a time when you kind of have to let them stand up for themselves and see what they're really made of. You've put all this into them over all these years of their lives. And then, there are times when you have to say, okay, let's see what you've got. That doesn't mean that, you're not there to help them along the way. But sometimes you have to do that. You have to just let go and
everybody's personality is different. And what my daughter ended up doing, I thought my son would do. I thought my oldest son would do those things. I thought, I'm going to train him. I'm going to teach him. But his personality was different. He wasn't a leader. He was a follower. Yeah. And school was a bad influence on him, and
Yeah.
his friends were a bad influence on him. So, and I mean, there's a lot of ingredients that go into, what made him the way that he was. And children, you have to treat them individually. They all have different personalities. They have different strengths, different weaknesses,
Yes.
different spiritual gifts.
Yeah.
And my daughter, she wanted to be there. There was a point where she was like, I don't want to go to the school anymore. I'm tired of surrounding this. This is before her, she went into that program. And but then, I mean, she made it her mission to be a witness, and she stood up boldly, and she even wrote papers about, pretty much, my paraphrase, how stupid feminism was for that teacher who was a feminist. So
Wow.
yeah, but and that's the kind of stuff I did in high school too. Everybody's different. Some people are weak, some people are strong, and I don't necessarily mean it that way. They're more impressionable. It all
Yes.
depends. It
Yeah.
all depends. So
And you're right. There are many, many variables that go into each individual and each person. But I think ultimately, and I know we're just about out of time, but ultimately it comes down to really, really sticking to our guns and instilling, uh, like you said earlier, instilling, showing them, telling them, teaching them continually about what is happening. Continue to have the conversations, keep talking, keep communication open. I mean, I'm sure that you had to be open with your children, with Evangeline. You had to have good communication, because if you cut off your communication when you sent her to that school and you were worried and you're just like, well, okay, we'll see what happens with her, and then nothing was ever said, you let her go, then you're not going to know what's
yeah,
happening. So you had to ask her the questions. So how's it going? What are you finding out? What are you seeing happening? So continue to talk with your children, even with the little ones. We can have these conversations about, I have conversations with my grandchildren. My granddaughter, she's 10, she stays with us a whole lot, our youngest granddaughter. And I talk to her about some of the bad things that can happen, just being out in the neighborhood, being in a yard. you know that's why I don't want you in the front yard, because I can't see what's going on. You're behind the fence in the backyard. I know you're a little bit safer back there. you
mhm,
know and why I feel that way, not to scare her, but to help her to understand that there is really bad things in this world. She's blonde hair, blue eyed. She is a target.
mhm.
And, you know, they they have to learn, they have to understand these things, and continuing to talk and to keep communications open and to pray with them, pray for them, keep those prayers continual, and training them up. Um, what you know what else do you have, Tom?
Well, no, that's exactly it. Prayer. I tell you what, um, my kids have helped my prayer life so much, because obviously I'm like, Lord, okay, I'm getting closer to you, because I need to be closer to you, because I need your help with them, right?
Yeah.
No matter what it is, I mean, all the craziness my older teenage boys put us through. Oh my gosh, that really strengthened my relationship with my wife and I, because we had to hold on to each
Join
other, because
forces.
that was the only way to make it through. They were trying to divide and conquer, right?
All right.
And so prayer obviously is the most powerful thing. What you said was communication, and there's a recipe for what happened, you know, to me, to my kids, and I look at what happened to my son. And my son, when he was little, they used to, say, wow, this kid's going to be an evangelist. You know what I'm saying? He would go around and lay hands on people and pray, and I taught him to pray. And And I modeled all that for him. And when he was 9 or 10 years old, he saw his parents go through a divorce. He prayed, believing that that wouldn't happen,
No.
and it shattered his faith, and
Yeah.
it did some damage on him, right?
Yeah.
So, and that was one of the ingredients in the recipe. My daughter was much younger. It still had an effect on her, but I was able to to develop and build my relationship with her. And there were some key times that I had,
Yeah.
and there was that time that I got when I got off of work, and then she was off of school. Well, we could spend 45 minutes to an hour every day, and we would talk girl talk. I'm very blessed with my relationship. Excuse me. And my daughter still calls me up and we talk girl talk, right? And she
Mm-hmm.
shares things with me, and she has a good relationship with her mom too, which I'm totally that's great.
Mm-hmm.
She got to go on a lot of trips with me. I tried to put women in front of her that were good leaders and good models,
Mm-hmm.
like Shelley Disdar, Russ Disdar's wife.
Yeah.
Sunday school teachers had a great impact on my daughter. Okay. And I'm thankful, because I was a mess, there for a few years, and all I could do was get my kids to church. I couldn't do much else.
Yeah.
And, I'm sorry to make that excuse, but I am. But thank God for the godly Sunday school teachers that taught my daughter, and her heart was soft, and
Yes.
she received that, and all of that played. Now I could tell you about my other kids, and every one of them has different ingredients,
Yeah.
and we have to be sensitive to that. We have to fight. We have to stand up to this. I cannot believe, Faye, when I went to stand up to that board about what was going on, because word had gotten out about this LGBT awareness day. I thought, wow, Christians are going to show up. Pastors are going to show up. Crickets. Nobody
Yeah.
showed up. What the heck?
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
We got to show up.
Yeah.
We got to show up. Our kids, you know what? If your kids are homeschooled, so that's great. I'm glad. But what about the neighbors' kids? What about your
Yes.
grandkids? What about your cousins?
Yes.
Somebody's kids, they're not going to fight for them. We got to fight for ourselves. Hey, we're not going into hate. We're going into love. Okay.
Yes.
Um,
And being,
yeah.
I think another thing, and you kind of alluded to this, is, when you said you couldn't do anything at times but just take them to church, being transparent, being open with our children, because I think so many times we try to hide things. We try to shelter them because we think we're protecting them. But, I think personally, this is my personal opinion, being as open and honest and transparent with our children and our grandchildren as we possibly can. We're not perfect.
Right.
We've made lots of mistakes. I tell my granddaughter that, I want, I want more than anything for her to have a relationship with a father.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. But, I also want her to know that, things, I've struggled in my life. I've done a lot of wrong things. I've had a lot of wrong things done to me. I've shared those things with her, not in any graphic detail, but to let her know, hey, it happens,
Mm-hmm.
but we can overcome. And that's the other thing I want to share
Yeah.
is, even if, maybe you've been, maybe these adults have been hurt and they've been abused themselves, and they don't, I see this happen a lot, because then they want to try to put this bubble around their children to where it suffocates them almost, and they don't want them to know about any of the bad things. But, I'm not saying that we have to go out and, just tell them all, excuse me, all these deep, dark stories and things, but we need to also let them know and be aware of, what is there and what we can overcome. And like you said before, and you've said several times, we cannot do this on our own. It is only through uh, Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, through his power, the power of our Heavenly Father, because we have nothing on our own. We are nothing without him, without Jesus. And so we have to be able to utilize that in, the best way that we possibly can, and keep putting that as our goal. Keep that, as our marker, as our guide. Even Jesus said to bring the children to him. uh, he wanted to be around the children. He wanted to teach them. He wanted to tell them. He wanted them near him. So we should have that same desire, and praying, and in our fellowships, in our churches, and wherever we're at, and helping these children to make it. Because Gary and I say all the time, it takes a village to raise a child. We should be working together to do whatever we can, as parents and grandparents, and families, and the body of Messiah.
No, and 100% agreement. For maybe a lot of people know, but I'm just thinking you should share a little bit about what you guys do with Torah Town and what that ministry is about, what you guys been working on for a while.
Well, Torah Town is it's a biblically based website that we have. We started out with just videos that are following along the Bible, starting in Genesis, going through, Genesis, and it's broken down to the Torah portions. And for a lot of people that aren't familiar with that, the Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible. And then it's broken down a lot of times to weekly, daily Bible readings. And so that's really what spurred us on, because we didn't see a lot of biblically sound based, um, you know, videos, things for children to watch that didn't have, the garbage like we've talked about, following it and involved in it. And so, my husband started animating videos, and then it's grown exponentially into so many other things. The website has tons of homeschooling things on it. It has games, just you name it, it's out there. And my husband is so unbelievably talented that he has been able to bring all this together and to put it out there. And that is our goal, is to give children something that is, as accurately Bible based as we can be. um Not saying that we have it all right, or we, our what we post out there is perfect, because it's not. But just trying to do what we can to help parents to connect with their children and grandchildren, and families, to bring families together, to have discussions, to talk about these things that are in the Bible. And so that is our goal. That is our goal. Um, and so
Amazing.
these things are, these topics, because, Gary has the Tour Town end of things, and I tend to have this side of things, which are a little bit, you know, uh, a little bit different, but, still in the end of things, it all comes down, especially with these topics, it all comes down to the children, and what we, are striving for, to help them, to help parents. And because we know that that it's hard. We know that it is difficult to raise children. We've both raised children. I've not given birth to any children, but we've both raised children. And, so we understand and we know. And that's the goal. So.
Awesome. That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, you know what? I think we covered it today. We didn't get a chance to talk about
Yeah.
Jeffrey Epstein and what's going on there. There's been an arrest and a high profile celebrity, a billionaire that everybody knows. Um, everybody's familiar with. Maybe they're not. This guy was got a slap on the wrist for his past abuse of children in Florida, and now he's been arrested again. And we're hoping that there's going to be justice for these young girls that he's abused. So there's so many stories on this. I don't even know which one to cover, but I will plug my new website called realdarknews.com. We've been over there. We're trying to cover all this stuff. We're kind of short on writers, but the writers that we do have are working very hard. So the significance about Jeffrey Epstein is he's connected to politicians, and he's connected to the rich and famous. Celebrities have been on his airplane and been on his island. So you can go check all that out. I guess the most obvious one would be former President Bill Clinton, who has been on his airplane like 27 times, even though he came out today he came out a few days ago and said it was only 4 times. Well, according to the flight logs, and then he also stated, I don't know anything about what's going on. I never heard of this stuff before. Right. And according to the flight logs, there were underage girls. Okay. There were young girls on the plane every time Bill Clinton was on the plane. So,
well, I mean, we came from Bill Clinton era, you and I. So we know the validity of Bill Clinton's statements.
Right. Right.
So we won't put much stock in that. But I know we need to shut it down here, but I just wanted to say real quick, we really, really thank you guys for all of you that have listened today. Tom and I, we've been trying to do this for the last couple of months, and things have been rough. It's been a rough couple months for myself personally. I've had a hard time. I'll just put it like that. Probably one of the hardest times I've had. And, I've been through some big battles lately, but, the Father has not said stop. So I'm continuing, and I'm pushing on the very best of my ability. But, Tom and I wanted to be able to put these Hot Topic shows together for you at least once a month, so we can bring to the table, all these different topics that are going on. But we want the listeners to be involved. And, I know part of this today is my fault, because I couldn't get the stinking things to work right.
We got it figured out, though. We did not give up.
And because, excuse me, YouTube and Google Hangouts has changed everything. And then I've just seen a little statement that says in August they're not going to be doing it anymore. So I don't know what we're going to be doing in August, but we'll see. But I just wanted to thank everybody for listening, and hopefully we'll get this ironed out to where we're a little bit more organized and can do these things and get everybody involved and get everything prepared a little better ahead of time. Tom, please go to warriorwomenoffaith.org and check out the website. We're working on trying to get new testimonies. We're behind on things. That's because, I've slacked. I've been in a funk. So I'm working on trying to get these things worked out. Please pray for me. Please pray for the ministries here in this house, for Warrior Women of Faith, and for Torah Town. Pray for Gary and I that we can continue to do the Father's will. That is our desire. Tom, please tell us how they can get information on your content.
Yeah. Again, the website is throughtheblack.com. That takes you to our main stuff. We make films, we make videos, we have our own YouTube channel. And the new website is realdarknews.com. And that's where you're going to find a news with a Christian worldview, news on the paranormal, news on the human trafficking, on the satanic, exposing the satanic agenda, all that stuff. You'll find that on there on realdarknews.com. It's more of a news website. And in the coming months, we want to do boots on the ground reporting, things like that we're going to add to it. If anybody is interested in writing, we're looking for writers. throughtheblack.connect@outlook.com. Send an email there, say, hey, I'm interested in helping out, and you'll get an application, and then we'll go from there.
Yes. Awesome. I'm excited about that. Yeah. And if there's anybody that wants to share their testimony, please go to warriorwomenoffaith.org. And there is a tab there where you can share, send me an email, or you can tell us what you'd like to share with your testimony. But we are looking for people to continue to share. It's important that we talk, we share our testimonies, we share what the Father has given us. So anything else you have, Tom?
No, that's it. Hey, guys, God bless everybody, and thanks for hanging out with us.
Yes, thank you so much. Shalom. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.